Okay, so thank you for joining today's virtual workshop on Job Prep Toolkit. My name is Katie Popwell, and I'm the Career Services Advisor at the Lake Campus. Cheryl, do you want to introduce
And good
yourself?
morning. Yes, sorry. Good morning. This is Cheryl Kent from Wright State Dayton campus. I oversee the College of Engineering and Computer Science, work with those students directly for job and internship searches.
And also, if you could leave your questions towards the end of the presentation, we will be taking Q&A. So first and foremost, you want to make the most out of your time. Here are several tips and tricks to kind of start your job search, updating your resume and making sure that it is relevant and current to the position you are applying to. You would be pretty surprised. I know a lot of students, they have an entire like bibliography. Really, your resume is kind of a compilation of things you've done. It's not necessarily something that you have to have everything that you've ever done over a course of time. So updating your resume, making sure it's relevant and current again to the position you're applying to is really critical. Number two is cleaning up your social media. I can't tell you how many times I've had students not get positions. So cleaning up your social media, making it clean, maybe going through and getting some things off of there prior to applying. Whatever it is you need to do. That includes like your Instagram, your Twitter, your all those fun things. Third and foremost is learning a new skill set. Right now is actually the perfect time to do this because we're in the midst of a pandemic. There's several resources out there, one of them being LinkedIn Learning. You can learn a lot of different skill sets such as, Excel, pivot tables, so on and so forth. So this is a wonderful time, especially since you have a lot of downtime at home, to potentially learning a new skill set. Practice virtual interviewing. Cheryl will touch on this a little bit later in the presentation, but very simple kind of basics when it comes to virtual interviewing. Making sure you're in a quiet place where there's very minimal kind of distractions or interruptions is really key. Number five is really building your professional network. Can't say this enough. It's not always about like what you know, but who you know. So networking, if you've ever conducted informational interviews via LinkedIn, that will be also something we'll touch on later in today's presentation. But it's really all about networking and getting yourself out there, meeting and greeting with employers. Number six is seeking assistance from career services. There's a plethora of different services that we offer, which I will actually talk about on my next slide. So the Office of Career Services has a lot of different varieties of appointments one can make, from interview preparation to mock interviews. If you have any professional interviews coming up for a particular program, those are also things that we cover. Resume critiques, networking strategies. So again, LinkedIn Handshake, job and internships. So this could be anywhere from, again, LinkedIn to Handshake, but this could also mean going directly to the career landing page website of the company that you are planning to apply to, recruiting events, and more. So Handshake, I feel like there's a lot that is not being said about Handshake. I feel that a lot of students don't know what even Handshake is, but it's a wonderful resource, a university-wide tool. Essentially, Handshake is a one-stop shop for both careers and internship opportunities. Every student at Wright State has an account. You would just go ahead and utilize your same username and password that you already use for your Wings account. It's simple. By clicking on career interest, once you've already created your profile, on the top right hand corner under your name, you will walk through the several different kind of basic like interests that you are interested in. So once you click on those, it's kind of like recommending opportunities for you based on when you plugged in. So Handshake does use somewhat of a smart technology, and that based on your preferences that you put in your profile, it will start listing opportunities based on when you've plugged in. So just some other little tidbits for Handshake. Making sure that you allow for employer viewing. So you may want to look at what you have on your resume and then compare it to Handshake to ensure all of what you have on Handshake is what you want that employer to see before having them view it. Again, a great place to apply for jobs, internship opportunities. I also often recommend students to look on there for even possible volunteer opportunities as well. But again, this is where you can view job descriptions, the company profiles, to kind of learn a little bit more about who they are as a company and what it is they're looking for in a candidate.
Katie, I'd like to jump in before you switch slides. So one thing Katie didn't mention about Handshake, not only is it great for looking for co-ops and internships or full-time jobs upon graduation, but if you're currently looking for on-campus jobs or if you've been awarded work study through your financial aid package, those postings are also listed on Handshake. Handshake is nationwide. There are many schools in the Miami Valley that use Handshake in addition to Wright State. For example, University of Dayton and Cedarville also utilize Handshake. And so a lot of times there's companies that recruit with schools that don't recruit with all of our schools. So this gives you the opportunity to look at job postings from other companies that we might not normally see. I work with a lot of students that want to stay in Dayton, but then I work with a lot of students that are interested in relocating somewhere else in Ohio or somewhere else in the United States. And so Handshake provides you that opportunity to connect with employers in Colorado, California, East Coast to West Coast. It really opens up the opportunities for you. I know one of the challenges when students go to Indeed, a lot of times the job postings are asking for 5 to 10 years work experience. And one thing about Handshake, employers know that if they're looking for recent graduates or college interns, Handshake is going to give you that fresh graduating class. So they're not expecting all those years of experience. So Handshake is a great place to get started to look for entry-level positions. Thanks, Katie.
One last thing here we haven't mentioned is this is another way that you can view different, what is the word I'm looking for? More of like employer or even the university-wide events, which is either considered workshops, events, or even upcoming career fairs and expos. This is another great way that Handshake can kind of provide that information for you. All of that can actually be found under the events tab on Handshake. Soft skills. Did you want to review this, Cheryl?
So one thing I have learned with the COVID and being in quarantine is that networking is more important than ever. Talking to family, friends, professors, classmates, we can't stress that enough. The number one way to get a job is through who you know. And so a lot of times people don't realize that maybe Uncle Joe works for Procter & Gamble or your grandfather retired from Honda. So sometimes learning a little bit about your family history will give you ideas of family members to talk to. Classmates, you may have a friend that has an internship working for Ethicon Endosurgery. Why not talk to them and find out how they got that position, how they got started? Professors, there's a lot of companies that reach out to professors before they even reach out to career service staff or post on Handshake. So talking to professors is another good way to network. When you're networking, I would encourage you to ask for advice versus asking for a job. Ask them how they got started, learn about their career path, and maybe you can learn a little bit about what skill sets you might need to develop before applying for that position. So when networking, communication skills are a must. And so that's what we're going to talk about here now is soft skills. They're critical to not only networking, but also nailing an interview and landing that job. So communication skills, not only are they going to view us for what we type in maybe an email or a text, but they're also going to listen to our verbal communication, especially if we're talking over the phone or now virtually through all these different platforms. So to build your confidence, both Katie and I would encourage you to schedule a mock interview with any of the career advisors at Wright State University, and we'd be happy to help you establish more of a comfort level with discussing your skills and qualifications in relation to that job you're applying to. We'll talk a little bit more about nonverbal skills when we talk about the virtual interviewing, but it's important that not only are you maintaining appropriate eye contact, you're showing interest in the position, your facial expressions match your emotions, and we'll talk about some other maybe not physical or nonverbal skills, but just distractions in the virtual world that we now need to take into consideration when doing these virtual interviewing.
Thank you.
So I'm still up. So I like to get a little of interaction going. So I'm going to start a poll, and I would like for you to respond. I'm not going to type out the whole thing, so just give me 1 second. All right. So you should have the ability to see a poll in front of you. So what is the purpose of a resume? Is it A, to get an internship or a job, B, to highlight your accomplishments, or C, to get an interview? So in all reality, all three answers are correct. You are using an intern or a resume to get an internship or a job. It's a way to introduce yourself and to show that you're interested in a position or following the rules of application process. Your resume is a document to highlight your accomplishments, but the whole purpose of your resume is to get an interview. So when you meet with Katie or myself, if you say, hey Cheryl, I've been looking for an internship for a long time, my first question is going to be, well, how many resumes have you submitted? If you tell me you've submitted maybe 10 resumes a week or applied to over 30 positions over the last month, my next question is going to be, how many interviews have you received? If you tell me that you have not received any interviews, that's a cue for both Katie and I to say, let's look at your resume. Something on your resume isn't getting you to the next step. If you tell me that you've had a lot of interviews, but you're not getting the job offer, that informs us that we need to work more on your interviewing skills, and we'll suggest a mock interview. So the purpose of a resume is to get that interview. Katie, go ahead and move to the next slide, please. All right. Let me update this. So true or false? You should include all of the positions you've ever had on your resume. A, true, B, false. So it's important to know that your resume is going to be a succinct document, 1 to 2 pages. So this is not an autobiography. It should be very tailored to the jobs that you're applying to. It's funny, the other day I was talking to somebody, and instead of calling it the applicant tracking system, they referred to it as the applicant tossing system. So you want to make sure that your resume is matching what the employer is seeking, so that you're demonstrating at least 90% of the job qualifications. So let's say that you have been a lifeguard in the past, but now all of a sudden you're applying for a job as a web developer. You probably wouldn't go into great detail about your water safety instructor or your CPR or your past jobs as a lifeguard. I'm not saying it won't be on your resume, but it won't be the focus of your resume. Instead, you want to focus on skills related to the computer science, the web skills that you've developed. So maybe you're working in C# or maybe you're working in Java. You want to highlight those technical skills related to the job you're applying to. Now, on the other hand, if during the summer you see a great management position open up at the swimming pool, you'll create a different resume that's going to focus on those lifeguarding, your skills managing at the swimming pool. You might have to highlight your certifications related to the Red Cross. So think about what the purpose of your resume is and target that purpose versus including everything on your resume. I think I have one more quiz. Go ahead. All right. Oops. So how much time does the average employer spend looking at a resume? A, 2 to 3 minutes, B, 1 to 2 minutes, or C, 15 to 45 seconds? So if I had asked you this 5 years ago, it would have been C, 15 to 45 seconds, because human beings used to review resumes. You would submit them, and then they would go through and they would rank them and put them in a yes, maybe, or a no pile. Now we have artificial intelligence, and so that applicant tracking system is going to scan your resume for keywords. So now it probably doesn't even take 15 seconds for an applicant tracking system to see if you qualify or not. But if you do qualify, your resume is going to then be forwarded on to a human being, and I would assume that person is going to spend 2 to 3 minutes looking at your resume. But still, that's not a lot of time. So that's why it's so important that you look at the job posting and compare your skills and qualifications with what the employer is looking for. A keyword match is critical when it comes to the applicant tracking system. Now I'm going to pass it on to Katie because I think she has a lot more suggestions related to the resume.
Yes, so as Cheryl mentioned in the previous slides, the purpose of a resume is honestly to get the interview and not the job. Essentially, you want to know yourself, know your skills, your traits, what you bring to the table. Soft skills, hard skills are really critical. So soft skills are, for example, for a doctor, they also need to know not just the medical background, but they also need to know how to communicate to a patient, right? So noticing those simple like skill sets is really important when you're looking to apply for a position. Again, knowing the job description, so not necessarily verbatim copying the keywords and key phrases to utilize in your own resume, but you might want to take some little pieces here and there from your previous or past experiences and then applying it to the job description that you might be applying for. Again, as we kind of mentioned, I feel like we've hammered this into your brains, but I can't say this enough to tailor not just your resume. I know we're not talking about a cover letter today, but you want to tailor both of those professional documents because those are often the two separate documents that don't get you passed or don't get you the interview. So again, the resume and the cover letter are two the most important documents that you will want to focus on. Resume basics. So again, these are general rules of thumb. The heading should just be your basic contact information, your name, your email address, your phone number. It's optional to put your LinkedIn profile link. There's also a way on LinkedIn to customize your link so it's not a mile long on your resume. When it comes to some of your contact information at the very top, some students don't feel comfortable putting their entire mailing address, which is completely okay. If you can at least just put your city, state, and zip code, that at least gives the employer an insight as to where you reside, and thinking about that commute. 0.5 margins all the way around the document, reason being so that your content is really the meat and potatoes of your resume. That's what the employer is looking for. So again, as Cheryl mentioned before, make it succinct, easy to read, and just something that flows really well. You can either use Times New Roman or Arial font, something that's very, easy again to read. Targeted section headings I will get to in our next slide. PAR statements will also be a part of what we call our bullet points in the office. So for each of your bullet points, you really want to aim to like 4 to 5 of your bullet points that cover a project, action, and result. So the hiring manager, believe it or not, they only scan your document for about 15 to 20 seconds. So you want that most pertinent information to be towards the top. Your order of like your PAR statement, your bullet points, the order of those, as well as maneuvering around different section headings on your resume can make a big difference. So keep that in mind as you are drafting a new resume or currently working on your one now. This was a document that I created, and at the very end, I will send out some of the career resources that I've drafted and have created. One of which is targeted section headings for resumes and CVs. Again, CV is something that's a little bit longer in length, but for the sake of time, resume is what we're really aiming for. Again, 1 to 2 pages. Education section should always be your first section, and depending on what major you're in, those can follow. Academic class projects, if you don't have a whole lot of work experience, this is phenomenal to put on your resume, whether it's an individual project or a team group project, which we all know that team group projects are just something every organization and company do. So really think about some of these as you look through your resume. One of the other things I kind of want to point out, any campus or leadership involvement or leadership experience you've had, volunteer experience can also go on there. One thing I want to mention as far as like your relevant experience, that would obviously go more towards the top. And again, you're not going to list things that are maybe 10 or 15 years old. We want the most relevant and current information. So when you do put, say, for example, you're in customer service and sales, Maybe you make a section that's called customer service and sales experience at the very top. However, there may be some jobs on your resume that don't directly relate to customer service and sales, so that would give you an option to put it under other professional experience as a new section.
Katie, before you move on, I was critiquing a resume the other day that was an amazing resume. They had all these sections and skills highlighted, but they did not have their name, their email address, or their phone number. So think about it. If an employer really is impressed with what they see on your resume, they're going to want to contact you. And if your contact information is not visible on your resume, you're not going to be considered as a candidate. So of all the sections on your resume, your heading is the most important. I think what Katie covered here is excellent. Keywords are important on your resume, and you have the ability to play with your section headings and change the wording. So you could call it relevant experience. Maybe you haven't had paid work experience, but relevant experience could be those class projects, or could be maybe a hobby, or maybe you're really active in Girl Scouts and you did a project in the community. So those things could be included under relevant experience. Or like she said, you could have an additional experience section. Maybe you had military experience. You could have a whole section saying military experience. So the headings are a place for you to play with your resume and make your resume a little bit more targeted based on the job you're applying to.
So for resume rubric, these are some of the things to keep in mind as you're kind of determining what should you include, what shouldn't you include. If you are a junior or senior at Wright State University, there should be no reason why we can't, or why you have the high school experience on there. I always encourage and highly encourage my students to probably start taking it off like right around their sophomore year, especially if you have a lot of on-campus involvement. Avoiding I statements. So again, this also goes for cover letters. If there's ever a transition word that you can use, but for a resume, we always want to talk about PAR statements, and those are strong action verbs. So developed, drafted, created. So instead of saying I did this, tell us, an action verb, quantify it where you can. Results and outcomes are really important when it comes to an employer. So talk a little bit about not only what you did, but how were you able to accomplish it. No spelling errors or grammar errors. These are very quick, easy fixes. You can even just put it in a Word document. You can do a spelling check. I also encourage my students to put this information into Grammarly. I can't tell you how many times I've utilized this free tool for students to use. You can paste an entire paper in there, your cover letter, but this should also catch any errors that you might have in your resume. Outcome oriented. Again, quantify possible. Put the things that you've done on a measurable scale for that employer to kind of understand that scope of what you did, but also on how you were able to accomplish it. So did you say, for example, train 8 members on company procedures, policies, and protocols? This is something that you can actually measure, right? So again, don't just say, for example, I trained somebody or I trained them. What did you train them on? Did you do onboarding? Did you hire? So again, also mention where possible the CRM databases that you've used. Was it Salesforce? Was it a system that you particularly use at that given company? So again, try to make it elaborative, but not something that's so long.
Let me jump in real quick. So the outcome oriented, a lot of you may not have a lot of work experience outside the university, so you may highlight one of your class projects. I think one of the errors I see on resumes a lot is that the students are highlighting what was assigned to them as a class project, so what the task was or the rubric, instead of telling us what they did. So if all your classmates had to make a cardboard chair using SolidWorks, you're all going to have the same thing on your resume. So it's important to highlight what you did, what made your project different than your peers.
Right. Thank you, Cheryl. So prove your value. Create a list of some accomplishments. I always encourage my students as well to create kind of it's more like a project list of things that they've done, a running list of different things. So that way when you go back, you can then highlight what it is that you want to focus on in your bullet points per experience. So start thinking of numbers and results that you have had. Like, for example, what Cheryl just mentioned, if you were on a team for a project or by yourself, maybe you have your first bullet point as to what the project was about, right? And then maybe the second bullet point could be, what were the results? What was the outcome of you actually doing this project? Or maybe you collaborated with a faculty member and done research. So again, think of how many, how much, how long, what's the frequency? How often? Again, below example says, conduct a membership drive for computer club versus increase membership in computer club by 50% during fall of 2018 by what? So how did you increase? Was it through social media? Was it through, doing information session tables? So again, this is just one of the ways to kind of make your bullet point a little bit more critical. So again, just some more resume suggestions. We always want to start in reverse chronological order, starting with the most recent first. So if you are currently at Wright State, that would be the first thing. Over on the far right-hand side, you should just have your anticipated graduation month and year. And then followed underneath that, if you've transferred, you only really need your first education experience. Unless, of course, if you wanted to put that you have an AA in arts, for example, and you're going for a bachelor's, again, you want to take ownership of your own document. But that's one of the many ways for reverse chronological order. Instead of listing coursework, expand on what you learned and highlight those throughout your class projects. So that is, again, another way to kind of highlight some of the things that you've learned inside the classroom and how to be applicable into a position. Coursework at the very top of your resume, that can also be listed under your education section with just a simple bullet point. You don't want to necessarily list 5 or 6 classes, but think about some of the skills that you need in that position, and then think back to yourself and say, okay, well, these 2 classes or maybe these 3 or 4 classes really would help or would be a contribution to that company by knowing that information. Use the job description to identify key skills and be sure to include them on your resume. And how have you applied these key skills? So I think we touched on this a little bit earlier in the presentation when we said, if you've used Salesforce, talk about where in your bullet point or where at that position that you've used Salesforce or maybe SAS, like the statistical software. Talk about how you've utilized these skills so that way when the employer looks at it, they're like, oh, well, we're looking for this too. And maybe they're looking for somebody that has already utilized that software.
Before we move on to LinkedIn, I just want to do an audience check-in. Does anybody have questions about the resume? You're welcome to turn your microphone on and ask a question, or you can type it in the chat. As Katie mentioned, we will have questions available at the end, but we're kind of transitioning to a new topic, so I thought before you lose that thought or question in your mind, now's a chance to voice it. Hi, Emma. Go ahead, Emma, you can ask your question. Emma, we can't hear you, so if you want to turn your microphone on or if you want to type, Raphael, I would recommend if you are fresh in your education, your resume be 1 page. However, if you have experience related to the field you're going into, a 2-page resume is acceptable, but keep in mind, applicant tracking system will scan the whole document, but a human being might only read that first page. So the critical information needs to be on page 1 at the top. Marianne, you had a question.
So I don't have a question, but more of a statement, just because I didn't know this for the longest time. But when you're doing your resume, like in Microsoft Word, if everything is completely capitalized and all uppercase, it doesn't catch spelling errors. So one thing I always recommend to students is spell it out or write it out like you normally would a paper, and then you can go back and highlight and change things to uppercase just so it would catch any spelling errors.
That's great feedback. I didn't know that, Marianne. Talking about that, I've also heard that the applicant tracking systems have a hard time reading tables. So I know a lot of times students use tables on their resume to have like margins or columns, but I have heard applicant tracking systems have a hard time reading content within tables. So I would recommend removing tables from your resume as well. Any other questions before we move on? Okay, well, again, you can type them in the chat and we will, oh, there we go, Emma. When highlighting a project on your resume, how would you write that? Do you want to chime in here, Katie?
Yes. So when you are highlighting a project on your resume, it depends. So if it's for like a company that you maybe have assisted as a student, that can go under academic class projects. I would honestly probably put academic class projects and then list like the class name. I can send you a resume later today that will have like a team project or an individual project. Essentially, you want to name the course, university, and then after that, you would maybe want to specify in that first bullet point, what was the project even about? So kind of give us a little like a little blurb or a few words on what the project was entailed, and then after you would want to highlight it by telling us what was the end result, what was the outcome of you participating in the project. And it really does depend on what kind of project it was. So did it increase, Instagram followers? What, depending on what your project was, it really depends on what kind of follows, if that makes sense.
And Katie had mentioned earlier about following the PAR model. So if you're highlighting your class project, you might put the title of your project and then the course. And then your first bullet might be kind of an overview of what the project or the task was. And then your second two bullets might be more of the action you took or the specific skills or software tools that you might have used. And then the final bullet could be the results. Like Katie said, you increased Instagram followers by this %, or you gained this much in revenue or something like that. So I think breaking your bullet points down to help tell a story is very effective, but I would limit your bullet points to no more than 3 or 4 for a class project, because you don't want that to be the bulk of your resume.
Right.
All right, any other questions related to resumes before we move on? Okay, well, if something comes up, we'll have question and answer again at the end. So LinkedIn, once you start submitting your resume to applications, employers are going to start looking you up on social media. Maybe they're going to go to LinkedIn. Maybe you have a GitHub account. So they're going to try to gather more information on who you are or maybe what you've done. I always encourage students to Google themselves to make sure you have a good social media presence. If there's anything negative about you out there, you could go and ask the different search engines to remove that link. So definitely check your social media presence and see what people are seeing. You also want to make sure that your resume and your LinkedIn profile tells the same story. A lot of times I see more information on a cover letter than I do in the resume, but if the employer only read the resume, they're not going to see that information on the cover letter. Same thing, if you put a lot more detail on your LinkedIn profile and didn't include some of that information on your resume, the employer may never see it. So make sure you're telling the same story. There's a great link out there. I know many of you have maybe Googled how to create a LinkedIn profile or things like that, but LinkedIn actually has a page specific for college students, and it has videos and resources on how to use LinkedIn effectively, how to network, how to apply for jobs, and it even has job postings based on university level positions, so internships. So I would encourage you to view that link down at the bottom of your page, university.linkedin.com/LinkedIn for students. What a great resource. I can't talk highly enough of it. So the purpose of the resume, whoopsie.
Not sure what happened.
We clicked too many times. There we go. All right, so the purpose of that resume was to get the interview. Today's presentation is going to focus more on the resume writing because we want you all to be able to have that skill and then know that you can reach out to one of us to move on in the future. But we are going to talk a little bit about interviewing dress today, but not going into as much detail as we did as the resumes. There are a lot of good resources out there. But I really want to say today, if you have one takeaway, virtual interviewing is here to stay. In the past, an employer might have done a pre-screening phone call and then invited you in person to come see their company, to talk to somebody within their company, to take a tour of their facilities. Now virtual interviewing, it saves employers and the interviewee time, money. You don't have to travel. You don't have to worry about parking. They can interview a lot of candidates within one day. They don't have to worry about hotel or airfare. So I really think that virtual interviewing is going to become more of a normal practice, especially for the first several interviews within that organization. There are some great tools out there, best practices by Fast Company, virtual interview strategies by Virtual Vocations, 9 best practices for virtual interviews through Harvard Business School. So take a time to go out and look at some of these resources. I think the biggest thing on whether you're chatting in a session like we are today or if you're on a virtual interview is the etiquette related to this. We talked a little bit about nonverbal behavior. Nonverbal behavior could also be that dog barking in that background or the garbage truck going down your street. You need to think about what type of distractions you might have during your interview. So plan ahead. If you have to put a sign on the door that says do not enter, do so. If you have to crate your dog or your pet so they don't walk across your screen and people see it, you need to do that as well. Think about your location. What's in your background? Many of us are stuck at home and we may not have the resources to have a fake backdrop behind us. So make sure it's neat and clean. If you're in your bedroom, make sure your bed's made. Make sure your clothes are picked up. So maybe take a picture of what people see behind you and know how to maybe reorganize the surroundings, because that is definitely going to reflect who you are as a person. And I think something that we tried to eliminate at the beginning of this was we encouraged everyone to mute their microphones. A lot of us multitask while we're on these virtual calls, and there's nothing more distracting than hearing someone type as we are talking. So make sure that you eliminate background noises, whether it be you typing or the garbage truck going down the street, or maybe there's sirens or traffic outside your window. So you might have to shut your window. So think about what your situation is, and maybe doing the interview at home isn't the best resource. There are rooms at the library you can use. There are places on campus that are open that you could take advantage of. So find a quiet place that you can effectively interview using the video chat. So just like your resume, you're going to want to give a story during the interview. Many employers will ask for specific examples. Tell me a time when you did this. Describe how you accomplished that. Give me an example of how you've applied an engineering concept outside the classroom. So this is story time. You have to share with them what you did. And just like the PAR model, this is the STAR model, same kind of concept. Work them through the process. What was the situation and task at hand? If everybody in the class was involved in a senior design project, then you want to focus more on what your action was. Because again, everybody had the same rubric or the same task. So what's going to set you apart from your classmates or your peers is the action you took. The best predictor of past or of future performance is your past performance. If you did something really well in the past, more than likely you can replicate that behavior and do it again for the employer in the future. So if you saved a company during a class project time and money, more than likely you could save the future company time and money. So when in an interview, have several examples prepared so you're not giving the same example over and over to that interview question, and make sure that you're not only describing the situation and the task, but you're talking about what you did and most importantly, the results of your efforts. Sometimes our results aren't positive. Sometimes a project doesn't go as planned. Last spring, COVID really hit in senior design projects. They didn't get to be in the labs. They didn't get to create their prototypes. So the result wasn't what they wanted. But what did you learn from that result? What would you do differently? Take that knowledge that you had from the past and mold it and make it positive for the future. What to wear? Whoops.
Oh.
I'll go back.
There we go.
Okay, here's a screen for the ladies. What to wear? We've all heard for virtual interviewing, it's from the waist up. Okay, fine. If you want to dress from the waist up, that's great. However, if you spill coffee on your lap or you jump up startled, I hope you have something appropriate on your bottom half, okay? If you dress from head to toe, you're going to feel sharp, you're going to feel confident. That feeling is going to come through the camera screen. So I would encourage you to dress from head to toe, even if it's a virtual interview, because that confidence will shine through. And again, that nonverbal, the social skills, is going to help you get that job. So for ladies, a neutral color, a well-fitting suit. It doesn't have to be a matching jacket and pants or skirt, but you know, think about what you're portraying. A lot of times clothes are less expensive in the junior department, but they're also a little bit more risque. So you want to be sure that you're coming across conservative and they're not, what you're wearing is not distracting. So men don't really have to worry about necklaces and accessories, but I don't want to be staring at your necklace. I want to be hearing what you have to say. So you want to make sure whatever you're wearing is not distracting. Men. Oops, there we go. Again, you know, a suit might be a thing of the past, but you still want to dress to the nines. You want to show the employer you know how to dress up. You want to show the employer you know how to tie a tie, because you never know what kind of situation you might be in. When in doubt, ask the person that scheduled the interview, what is the appropriate attire for the interview? If they say business casual, ask them to describe, what exactly do you mean by business casual? Is that, you know, a shirt and tie, or is that just a polo shirt? So when in doubt, ask for clarification. Any feedback, Katie? Anything you want to add?
I think you pretty much covered it.
Okay. So a few takeaway tips from today's presentation. Know the company, know what they're looking for. Reynolds & Reynolds is located here in Dayton, Ohio. I have Reynolds Wrap in my kitchen. Reynolds & Reynolds does not make Reynolds Wrap. Don't go into a company thinking you know what they do. Research the company so you definitely know what they do. We always prepare students, describe yourself, why are you interested in applying for this job? What if the employer's first question wasn't, tell me about yourself, but what if it was, tell me what you know about my organization? Would you be able to answer it? So research the company. It will really benefit you in the long run. What knowledge, skills, and abilities are in demand right now? Online courses. People have the ability of taking classes at Harvard and MIT at low cost. If there are certain skill sets that you need to make yourself a more qualified candidate, take advantage of this situation and try to increase those skills. Enhance your appeal, quality versus quantity. You know, in the past, we might have told you, apply for 20 jobs every week. Now, if you apply for 20 jobs every week, I want you to pick at least 5 of those positions and really dig deep into those positions, research the company, and network with the employers. It's one thing to submit your resume and hope an applicant tracking system picks it up, but it's another thing to submit your resume and then all of a sudden someone comes up to me and says, hey Cheryl, did you know this student? I think he'd be a really good candidate for this job. And then all of a sudden I reach out to DP&L and say, hey, I've got this student at Wright State that I think would be a really good candidate. And word of mouth is going to get you a lot further than applying blindly through the website. So quality, think about the quality of your job search versus the quantity. And as I mentioned, make sure you're networking with intent. So I click, there we go. You want, yep, go ahead.
So I created this little diagram over here on the right-hand side. So as you are probably all aware, I know COVID has really hit a lot of people in various different ways, even companies, organizations. So I know that the job and internship search is really, you guys might be struggling a little bit. But be proactive, as we mentioned throughout this presentation. Do your research, do company research, do companies go to their career landing website, learn about what their mission, their vision is. You know, what kind of values do they hold? Are those the same values that you would want in a career? So start thinking of it like that. Again, here's some additional tips and tricks to a successful search. First and foremost, as I mentioned before, I can't say enough about going and actually going to the career landing website of that particular company. You will learn so much information about who they are as a company, what is it they're looking for, what it might is, you know, are you looking at diversity? Are you looking at, again, the values that they hold? Are those the same values that you're also looking for? So instead of sometimes even going to Indeed, I would highly encourage you to visit some of the companies that you're really interested in applying for and learn more about the company that way. So identify opportunities that interest you. I can't say this enough either, by saving the job description. I can't tell you how many times in the past that I've applied for a position and they have called me in for an interview and I did not have the job description. So I had to go back through my applications to go and look for it. So save that as something on your desktop in a file. I've found that very helpful. Conducting informational interviewing, the same thing goes for networking. Reach out to some of these individuals on LinkedIn, and you can even just say, hi, my name is Chad. I'm currently a student studying blah, blah, blah at Wright State University. I understand you're really busy, but if you could take about 10 or 15 minutes to explain what you do here at XYZ, I would really appreciate it. And again, you might get a rejection, you might get a no, but that's the time to move on to the next person. So don't ever stop that search. Find more information about the company, the organization, what it's like to work there, what's the training like. That is one of the biggest ways I think it's the most advantageous way to learn more about the company during this time right now. Handshake, LinkedIn, and your Google search are probably going to be some of the top places to take a look at aside from the career landing website. So connect with companies, employers, talk with your other classmates, talk with your instructors. Again, as Cyril mentioned earlier in the presentation, there might be somebody that down the road that they're looking for, and you just so happen to be talking to that person. So again, it's sometimes all about who you know and not what you know. Utilizing keywords and key phrases, specifically when you're looking for jobs on, or even internships, co-ops on Handshake, you want to utilize some keywords and key phrases, just because sometimes if you put, say, for example, engineering, you might also put engineering internship search by filtering out the boxes, but they may also provide you two different lists of the what's out there, what opportunities are listed. So be aware of that as you're kind of typing in certain things into Handshake. And last but not least, talk with HR. Oftentimes on Handshake specifically, there is a point of contact that might have a name or an email. I would kind of maybe give it about 7 to 10 days after maybe you've had either a phone interview or something like that to see maybe where they are in the process. Like I said, there's a lot of companies right now that are in limbo. They're, kind of going through hiring freezes and things of that nature. So, always kind of have a piqued interest in when will I know, or when can I expect to hear back by. I think that kind of shows kind of in some enthusiasm and piques your interest even more in the position. But there is a fine line that you cross between, not nagging, but like trying to be desperate, and then the time that, you're just kind of contacting HR to see where are we in the process.
Before you move to the next slide, I just want to point out the very bottom of this flyer that Katie's sharing with you is probably the best resource you could use. You have a career services team at Wright State that is dedicated to help you with your job and internship search. Each college has a career consultant assigned to them. I know I try my best to have 2 to 3 employers on campus each week. Now that we're in a remote environment, my goal is to at least have one employer conducting some kind of virtual event with you every week in the College of Engineering and Computer Science. I know last week Katie had an internship job expo. Now that things are virtual, we're not limited by location. You just have to be able to log in. Sadly, sometimes it's a designated time and it's not as good with our schedules, but you don't have to drive all the way out to Lake Campus anymore. Now we can just go on virtually. Employer resume critiques, mock interviews. This is a chance to get in front of that employer. A, yes, you're trying to build your skills and be a better interviewer or have a better resume, but B, by getting in front of that employer, all of a sudden your resume is in front of them. You don't have to worry about the applicant tracking system. You have a human being. You have their attention. Same with a mock interview. I can't say how many times it started out as a mock interview, but then the students actually ended up getting an internship offer from the mock interview. So take advantage of the resources Career Services is providing, and don't just take it at face value. Take it as the opportunity to network.
I think we have a question from Emma. When business was back to normal, how much is too much when it comes to contacting someone? Did you want to touch on that, Cheryl, or do you want me to take it?
Sure. So I don't know if we'll ever be back to the normal we knew before, but how much is too much? You know, if you reach out to an employer and you apply for a position, and then maybe you follow up a couple of days later to make sure they received your application, I would probably wait another week before any kind of correspondence. So you submitted a position, maybe you followed up a couple of days later, and then maybe you follow up one more time. I wouldn't do anything more than that. Any additional advice, Katie?
I think you pretty much hit it head on. You definitely want to leave it up to the employer. Sometimes they might be sifting through hundreds of applications, so allowing them enough time to get back to you. Just because you don't want to be that desperate side, like, hey, I'm following up. There's, I would say, 7 to 10 business days, especially after you even have the interview, would be a good time to follow up, especially if you haven't heard back. But I think maybe like 1 to 2 follow-ups, I think is kind of normal. I don't think any more than that should kind of take over.
And think about the mode or the way that the employer reached out to you. So if the employer called you, you probably should call them. Or if the employer emailed you, then maybe you try to reach out to them through email. Or maybe they reached out to you through LinkedIn. So think about the way they reached out to you, and that would probably be how I would recommend that you reach back to them. Or if they give you clear instructions. I enjoyed interviewing with you today. We have several other candidates we're going to be speaking with. We'll get back with you in 2 weeks. Do not reach out to them until after that 2-week period. Follow their directions.
Good advice. Okay.
So I don't think we can stress this enough. It's more about who you know. Get yourself out there. There's some great resources on like 7 non-irritating ways to network online, how to network during a quarantine. So take advantage of some of these resources. Stay connected to who's hiring. There's a lot of sites out there that will give you ideas of what companies are hiring. And some of the companies we've never even heard of, or some are new startup companies that are offering all remote positions. So even though the company may be located on the East or West Coast, it doesn't mean that you can't apply for a job there because maybe they're only hiring in a remote environment. I did a mock interview with a student yesterday, and we went onto the company website, and I was like, wow, check out that building. That would be awesome to work there. And then reality hit me, and if they're all working remotely, you may never step foot in that building. So think about the situation. A lot of times the barriers that come with the job search are things that we're putting on ourselves, and it's not necessary. So have a broad outlook. Here's a link of just different virtual events and workshops. Wright State does a good job of posting all of our events on the Wright State website on the calendar. They're also posted in Handshake, and several of your career consultants have pilot pages for the colleges. I feel like there's a lot of information not only on social media, but also on these websites or these job tools like Handshake. But here's a couple other websites that might be of benefit to you.
So again, just some student resources. As we probably mentioned, I would say the top two for sure would be LinkedIn and Handshake. Indeed is also another way to seek internships, co-ops, or work part full-time opportunities. But we have also listed here USA Jobs. So there's a lot of governmental type positions that are posted on there. Ohio Means Internships and SokiIntern.org. So there's a variety of career resources out there for you to utilize. It's just you need to get out and explore these different tools to become comfortable. Is there any questions? Any questions that we didn't maybe touch on in?
So you're welcome to raise your hand or turn on your mic or simply send a question through the chat. We covered a lot today. We covered resumes. We covered a little bit about LinkedIn. We covered a little bit about interviewing and then networking. Honestly, the easiest way is probably scheduling an appointment with one of us and starting by looking at your resume.
Okay, so if there's no questions, go ahead.
So as I mentioned, I advise students in the College of Engineering and Computer Science. Many of the students know me very well, and they receive a lot of information through a pilot page. A lot of your career consultants have that pilot page. If you're not with the College of Engineering, but you're interested in more information, you can always email me, and I'll introduce you to your career consultant. All students at Wright State have the ability to self-schedule appointments with anybody in career services. You can just use the link at the bottom of the screen, wright.campus.eab.com.
So, Sai, to answer your question, you can schedule an appointment by visiting this this hyperlink down here that Cheryl just mentioned. So, I am located at the Office of Career Services at the Lake Campus. I'm located in the Student Success Center 182A, but as for right now, I am currently working remotely, so the best method of communication would be by email. I do frequently check my voicemails as well, so if you happen to leave a message, I'll be sure to get back to you. You can also schedule an appointment at the link below, but I also have it outlined in my email signatures as well. So,
Katie, let me jump in. If you all call us, please leave a message with your phone number and we'll be happy to return your call. A lot of times students will leave a message and no phone number, and sometimes it makes it very challenging if you're calling from a different number. So don't assume that we have caller ID.
All right. Well, thank you for participating in today's virtual workshop. I hope today was very helpful. And I look forward to hopefully working with a few of you that have attended today's session.
Excuse me.
Yes.
I had a question.
Go ahead, Sai.
Yeah, actually, I had a question. How can I set up a mock interview? I mean, schedule a mock interview so that I can see how well I fare up.
Yes, so as Katie mentioned a moment ago, on the screen, the bottom here says to schedule an appointment. If you just go to that website, you can click the college that you're affiliated with, and it will connect you with that career advisor, and you can schedule an appointment. It does not allow you to schedule same-day appointments, and I think right now you would either select career service web, like WebEx, or over the phone, and then in the notes you can write that you're looking for a mock interview.
Okay, gotcha.
Or you can email us directly and we can help you if this link doesn't work.
Okay, thank you. That would help me a lot.
Any other questions before we conclude for today?
I think that might be it.
Well, thank you all for joining us. We really appreciate it. If you have any questions or concerns, we'll stay on for a few minutes. I'm going to go ahead and turn the camera off. Well, that's not turning the camera off.
And I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing and recording this so that later on we'll be putting this towards a repository, so students who may or may not have been able to attend or attended late in the session will have access to this at a later time.